Hey everyone, Dave here talking to you today about comparing buying a business versus buying stocks and how we think about what to pay for these things. So, I'm going to put up some graphics throughout this thing. The first one I want to talk about is, let's say you're interested in buying a business and it's important for you to make all of your money back in profits within the first 5 years of owning the business. And so intuitively, we know that the more profitable the business is relative to the sales price, the faster you're going to make your money back. So let's look at a business making 5% or growing at 5% a year and earning in that first year, say 100,000 in profits. So we'll put up the graphic and show that if we buy that business, say for 550,000, the first year we earn 100,000, it grows 5% a year thereafter. And at the end, we land and have made our full $550,000 back in terms of the purchase price. Feel great about that. Now, let's say it's a business that is growing. We think we can grow it at a rate of 10% a year. Will we be willing to pay more or less? Well, again, intuitively, we'd be willing to pay more because profits are growing faster and we would make our money back faster. And so in this case, we'll put up the next graphic and show that we might be willing to pay $610,000 for a business that was making $100,000, growing at 10% of the year or every year. And we see again on this table that we get our money back in 5 years, which is our goal. We get back up to that 610,000. We love that. All right, so let's switch to stocks. And I want to say, I'm going to talk about some members of the Magnificent Seven, specifically Apple, Amazon, and NVIDIA throughout the rest of this video. And this is not a recommendation to buy any of those stocks. It's not a recommendation to sell any of those stocks. We're just going to go through some math here and show you some interesting ways to look at things. So one of the ratios that we talk about a lot is the price to earnings ratio. And that is basically a measure of how much we're paying for the stock versus the current year's trailing 12 months years of earnings. And that's the PE ratio that we hear about. And when you think about it in the context of a business, it makes total sense, which is businesses that we think are going to grow quickly, we'd be willing to pay a higher multiple for. You saw that. In the business I just showed you, we were willing to pay a 5.5 multiple of profits for business one and a 6.1 multiple for business two. So similarly with stocks, we'd be willing to pay for a higher ratio for fast growing businesses than slow growing businesses. So if we look at Amazon as an example, we'll put up the next graphic here. Amazon, the last 4 years, has grown its earnings by 16%. And so, we might be willing to pay a pretty hefty multiple because we can see if our stock price grew by 16% each year, we get our money back in 5 years. It's just like the business example. Conversely, if we look at a business like Apple, it has roughly the same PE ratio. I think the Amazon is 30. We'll put that graphic up eventually. Amazon's PE is 34. Apple's is 30. But Apple, the last 4 years, has only grown at 6%. And if we show the next table, which we'll put up here, you can see that a business growing at 6% a year, it takes you 12 years to get that money back in terms of if that's what we see out of the stock price and growth. And so, well, how do we solve for this? Okay, we have to be able to look at what we think is going to happen in the future. And that's where a second and very interesting metric comes up for stocks, where we can look at not only the price to earnings ratio, looking at the last 12 months of earnings, but then also look at the price, it's called the PEG ratio, the price to earnings growth ratio. And this is a look at what analysts would say the stock is going to do on a go forward basis for the next 5 years. Now we'll throw NVIDIA into the mix. And if we look at it just in the context of price to earnings, we'd absolutely say that Apple is the best buy here. We're only paying 30x earnings to buy that stock. But if we look at it in terms of what analysts are saying, NVIDIA is actually the best buy. Despite having a PE of 38, the price to earnings, the PEG ratio, price to earnings growth ratio, is only 0.9. Now, again, This is not a recommendation to go and buy NVIDIA or sell Apple or do anything with any of these stocks, because there's a lot more involved in terms of stock selection. But I guess that the overriding message here is we do actually have to pay attention to these metrics at some point. It's no accident that when in July of 2024, when the average PE ratio of the Magnificent Seven was 50, we could make a pretty compelling argument that they were overvalued. And it didn't take much in terms of bad news to really push us into the correction that we saw earlier this year. Now we're seeing a nice recovery currently, and we all hope that it continues. And one of the reasons why it may is because valuations are better. We can buy these shares more cheaply on the basis of what they're going to earn, just like the decision that we were making on whether to buy those businesses or not. So that's it for looking at stock valuations versus how we might buy a business. Like and follow if you'd like to see more from me. Take care.